Ahora estoy moviendo desde allí. Vale. Buenos días.
Good morning. Firstly, thanks for inviting me here. It's an honor for the Commission, both for Jeroš and myself, to be here at this conference. If I'm not mistaken, this is the 10th time it's been held, so congratulations on your 10th birthday. What I'm going to try to do is to give you an overview of the directives and the main priorities of VET in the European Commission's agenda. My overheads are in English. I haven't had time to translate them, but I'm going to give my talk in Spanish so you can practice both languages. This gentleman, you may well know, is the President of the European Commission, and he set as his objective when he arrived in Brussels in November that the EU should mobilize all its instruments to develop the skills and knowledge of the European workforce, and above all, promote vocational education and training and lifelong learning. And this lady here, who's the new Commissioner for Employment and Social Affairs, Skills and Labour Mobility, is going to be the person in charge of implementing this agenda. And why have I highlighted the word skills? Because it's the first time in the 60 to 70 years that the European Commission has existed that a commission has been given the exclusive role of dealing with skills. And this just goes to show how important this policy is in Brussels and the importance we attach to it. Of course, that's not an easy thing to do. Differences have broadened during the crisis. For example, unemployment. It is true that for the last year or so there's been a drop in the unemployment rates, or no increases in any of the EU states, even in those countries that have suffered greatest from the impact of the crisis on their labour markets, for example, those that are towards the right of the diagram. There we see that the labour market reforms are beginning to bear their fruits. Of course, there's still a lot to be done because they initially had a much higher number of unemployed. What is more concerning is structural employment in the EU. I'm not an economist. I actually took a long time to try to understand this graph. I'm sure you will understand it quicker than I did. The Beveridge curve, what it shows is the ratio between, or the relationship between, unemployment and vacancies on the labour market. The red line is in the Eurozone, and the blue line represents the EU 28. And what do we see from this curve? Well, in 2007, with an unemployment rate of around 7%, the vacancy rate was fairly high, which meant that we were in a great scenario. Many job offers, many vacancies, and very few people unemployed. But what have we noticed since then? The curve is sliding towards the right. What does that mean? It means there's been a tremendous drop in the number of vacancies and a move to the right, which means there's been an increase in unemployment. The thing is, until this curve goes back towards the left, there won't be any sort of adaptation between supply and demand. That means there's going to be very few vacancies, or a limited number of vacancies in comparison to the beginning of the crisis, and a greater unemployment rate. So there's this mismatch between supply and demand. But maybe we ought to just be wondering how we got to this situation. Currently, a third of European entrepreneurs say they have difficulties in finding skilled workers. That is, workers that have the skills, the knowledge that they need for the jobs that they have on offer. Perhaps more worrying is the data from a study that was published in 2014 by the European Commission, which shows that 74% of educational institutions believe that their graduates are prepared to launch themselves onto the labour market. And this is contrasts with the view of the graduates themselves. Only 38% of those who are leaving the education system feel that they are ready for the labour market. Only 35% of entrepreneurs think that. So the perception of the world of education, the perception of students and the business community shows there's a huge abyss of almost 35 points. Maybe that, and I'm including here Brussels, the member states, maybe we've all been a bit to blame for this situation, because for far too long emphasis was put on how to get into university education, how to fight against school and university dropout, and perhaps we haven't paid sufficient attention on its relation to the labour market. We're designing courses, vocational training, studies. Are we truly designing them in the most useful way for the labour market? And these overheads seem to show not. And what's more, there's also a problem involved in recognizing different skills that different European Union states award their students. That makes it very difficult to be mobile, and North European countries find that they're lacking skilled workers, and yet other countries where they have a lot of unemployment, the workers from these countries can't actually move to other countries. They're not mobile because the countries that require them don't recognize their skills. So, vocational training's been very fashionable thanks to the crisis. It would seem that vocational training is considered the panacea, or like a life raft in the middle of an ocean of unemployment. But it's not as simple as that. It is true that there are a series of indicators and facts that have shown that those countries that have a VET that has many practical placements, either on the workplace or in labs, or of course mainly on the job, those countries have lower unemployment rates, lower youth unemployment rates as well. Those people who graduate from VET manage to find jobs far more quickly. Their transition into the labour market is much, much quicker when they come out of VET colleges, and they usually keep their jobs for longer than those who are in tertiary or even university education. Here we can see the leading countries, which are Austria, Denmark and Germany. Behind them we've got the Czech Republic, Holland, and right at the bottom, bringing up the tail end, we've got basically the southern European countries. Of course, this is confirmed when you look at this bar chart, in which you can see student participation in vocational education and training that has some kind of a practical component to it, i.e. that follows some kind of dual system in which there's classroom teaching and practical placements, actually confirms the data that I've just showed you previously. The leading countries are the ones on the left of the diagram, and those that are bringing up the tail end are those on the right. And this, not always, but normally actually coincides with unemployment rates. What is perhaps something that needs to be highlighted is the estimation of demand for medium qualified professions, i.e. with technical and specialist knowledge. It's estimated are going to grow between now and the year 2020 by around 3.5 million people or jobs. And this is actually 50% of the European active population. But where there's also a lot to be improved is in the percentage of students who combine classroom training with practical on-the-job training. If the differences between the labour market and the unemployment levels are major in the actual field of formation, vocational training, it's even more noticeable. And this is also confirmed in the manufacturing sector. What you can see in this diagram is that in coming years there's going to be a need to change the kind of workers that are in the workplace today for workers that have medium and high qualifications. So it'll be an exchange in workers, but also a logical progression from within the sector itself. Politically, next week, the vocational and education and training ministers are going to be meeting in Riga, Latvia, to adopt a new agenda of priorities in VET. Their priorities that were used to be 9 are going to be reduced to 5, and it's not that we've left 4 out, but we feel that as a result of the crisis we need to take a new look at what the routes to be followed should be between now and 2020 in this field. Firstly, we're going to be promoting dual training, that is with a very practical component to it in all the different formats that this can take, because we know that there are different ways of offering practical training. At the same time, guarantee that there are quality controls for VET by monitoring and by assessing VET programs themselves, so that courses can be adapted to what the labour market really needs, and so that we can learn from what works and what doesn't. Also, we need to facilitate access to training for everybody, and I mean not just via a youth-orientated VET, but also on-the-job training. In Europe, there are 70 million adults today who have a skills shortage, basic skills shortage for the labour market. And these are workers who are currently working, and they have a shortage of skills, even down to reading, communication, numeracy skills. So that means it's very important that those that already have a job are continuously trained. Digital skills are also going to become more important. You probably already know that, in fact, better than I do, because of the fields in which you work. Their increasing importance of digital skills. And then finally, the role of teachers, trainers, and mentors. We need to invest in them, care for them, and try to attract them into a profession which isn't always one that has a very good image surrounding it. At Brussels, we've also got our homework to be done. We're going to try to improve the European credit system for VET. We've set up a European platform for European associations of VET providers. We've also revamped our sector skills alliances, and we're going to be supporting cross-border quality VET programs. When we talk about sectorial alliances, these are under the Erasmus program, the VET unit, which used to be in DG Education and Culture, is now, since November, since the arrival of the new Commission in the DG for Employment. That says a lot about the intentions of our Commissioner when trying to connect VET with the labour market. And as a result of that, we also manage up to 25% of the Erasmus Plus program. I think that the Basque Institute of Vocational Training is already participating in one of those projects. I think Technica for the last couple of years has been in one of these alliances. But I'd like to say that this year, after the summer, we'll be putting out a new call for proposals, and it'll be divided into two sections. The first aims to improve the monitoring and detecting of the needs that different sectors have as far as labour goes, and the second will be, having seen those needs, how do we need to change syllabuses or curriculums and change the courses that we offer so that they are related to and cover the business demand more efficiently. There you've got the amounts, and in the Erasmus Plus website over the next coming months you'll be able to find all the information that you require. For a couple of years now, we've also, within the EURES program, been leading a project which aims to offer a first job, traineeship or apprenticeship to youngsters. And that's also a cross-border project. The idea is that you go to a different country for a period of time, which is normally around 6 months, and there you have some kind of job, traineeship or apprenticeship experience in another country. This can, on many occasions, then become fixed permanent contracts. We've been involved in this project for the last 3 years, and we've reached 5,000 European youngsters so far, which is, of course, a drop in the ocean. But nevertheless, everything is worthwhile. This is at the moment an experimental project, but it's going to increase importance, increase in weight, and it'll be getting more financial backing in coming years. The call, which is open now and which closes within a couple of weeks, has 8 million euros behind it and will be financing 2 projects. We also manage the European Alliance for Apprenticeships, the idea being improving quality, strengthening supply, and enhancing the image that vocational education and training has. And in fact, next week in Riga, our Commissioner will be driving once again this European Alliance for Apprenticeships, and will be launching a new part of it, which is the SME part, how to try to get SMEs involved in this European Alliance for Apprenticeships. And finally, Commissioner Thyssen, who's our Commissioner for Employment and Social Affairs, Skills and Mobility, at the end of this year will be launching a work plan for 2015-2016, and that'll include the agenda with all the details. This is going to be like a paper which will explain the European and national lines and will be structured around the three axes that you can see up on the screen. Firstly, what skills are necessary for the future, how they can be pinpointed, how to monitor them, how to follow them, how can we pinpoint what those needs are. Secondly, how to recognize and validate those skills. How can we improve the role of the European qualifications framework? How can we simplify our tools, because we're the ones that are to blame for being perhaps a little bit overactive in the European Union. We've got 16 activities and 14 information points, and that's just too much. It's far too confusing for the user and far too confusing for those people such as yourselves who have to deal with things on a daily basis. It'd be far more useful to have one information point or one reference point than 16. So we're going to try to rationalize that information. And finally, how to boost the supply of relevant skills that are relevant to the labour market's demands. And this is basically the third axis of VET, which I've just told you about in the previous slide. So with all of that, thank you so much for listening once again. Thank you for inviting us here, and I wish you the very best of luck with the rest of today.